Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? We've got a chunk of people here. Let's kick this off. Just kind of to start from the top. My name's Caleb Nelson. I'm joined by Kevin Miller here at Sifted. Our job is to be able to, yes, sift through your data to identify areas in which you can make improvements, both contractually and operationally. And today's topic for our Sifted live demo is going to be on carrier diversification tips and tools. So let's jump in. Uh, really, at this point, these work really well when we have participation from the group. So if you have a question, I highly encourage you to drop it in to the Q&A section in that Zoom link. Ask away. We will stop what we're doing and answer at any point in time. And we'll try to get through as many of these questions as we possibly can. Sometimes carrier diversification can be very specific to who you are as a shipper, how you ship, and where you ship. So if you have further questions after this, I recommend setting up some time directly with us, or if you're a Sifted client, setting up some time with your CSM. We'll go through that and how to reach out to them. But let's go ahead and get started. And I'll keep my eye on the Q&A section here, and we'll make it as interactive as we possibly can. So I get a lot of questions on why diversify? What's changed in the market? Kev, you mentioned at the very beginning that the market's changed quite substantially. I
Yes.
think really since COVID, shippers have had a massive amount of problems that they've dealt with FedEx and with UPS. That is a duopoly that acts more like a monopoly. We need UPS and FedEx. There is not another carrier out there that's a direct replacement to FedEx and UPS right now. But being able to not have your eggs all in one basket, I think is the big takeaway that shippers, just like you all are on here listening, have walked away with for the last couple of years, which is it reduces my risk. There's improvement in terms of transit time and cost that we'll get into. But labor constraints to COVID constraints to, I think, one that touches the nerve on pretty much everybody here is never-ending rate increases, it feels like, and the increase at which it's happening. So there's also been a substantial amount of money that has been pumped in to alternative options, such as OnTrack or Pitney Bowes, DHL e-commerce, a couple of them here. Oddly enough, I have Amazon listed on here. That is a great one for us to ask some questions on, because there is moves Amazon is making in the marketplace right now to compete.
Yes. They're making some pretty big and aggressive moves actually, which
Yeah.
is exciting to see somebody try to compete with UPS and FedEx.
If anybody can do it and actually, topple a duopoly, it's got to be a juggernaut like Amazon.
Yep.
We saw DHL try to do this in the early 2000s when they bought Airborne Express, and it failed, unfortunately for them. But you have more options than you've ever had before as shippers, with more pressure to make changes away from FedEx and UPS and create what we call swim lanes. So we can dive into that and go through it from here, but ultimately, this is the takeaway. Being able to have some cost mitigation, which I think is massive, some risk mitigation as well, and then possibly reaching your customers faster for less money. I think that there are if we can hit all three of those in a carrier diversification plan, it's a home run. So we're going to talk a little bit about, okay, let's say I'm single sourced with FedEx or with UPS, or maybe I've got a little bit of a dual source system here, but 80% of the business is going with one carrier. We still consider that mostly single source. We're going to be talking about how to diversify. There's a lot of things in which you need to do operationally that Sifted doesn't cover, but the plan and putting it in motion and identifying how much it will either cost or save you to diversify, that's really where Sifted's bread and butter's at. So we're going to be talking about defining the metrics that matter and creating swim lanes with individual carriers, to then isolate and say, oh, I can peel away X% of my total spend with FedEx or UPS going to this area to give to this particular regional carrier. So diving into it from here, Kev?
Yeah, so I'm just going to touch on it at a high level, and then I actually want to dive into the software that many of you, being a customer of Sifted, would be familiar with, so you can identify where to find these swim lanes in the Sifted software. But first, I think it's really important to know what KPIs, what metrics actually matter when you're trying to identify these different swim lanes. So different ones that we generally look at are, what is my average cost per zone? How long are my packages taking to arrive to their destinations? Because we do have, for example, if you're an e-commerce shipper or a retail shipper, Amazon has kind of ruined a consumer's expectation that it needs to be there in 2 days or less.
Yeah.
And so transit is actually really important to know, are the carriers that I'm using behaving the way that I would expect them to? Looking at, your service mix by zone or even by state, because there are certain regional carriers that if you're sending packages out of a certain state to other states, it could create a swim lane for you that could create some cost savings as well. And then also looking at your accessorial breakdowns, as Caleb mentioned, with these rate hikes, every single year, we see the freight go up, 6-7%, but accessorials are going up significantly higher. So if you think about additional handling, it's gone up 20% every year for the past 3 or 4 years. Exponentially, that's super impactful for anybody shipping heavier packages. And it makes it so that it's almost not even viable to ship through UPS or FedEx on those heavier parcel packages. So knowing what those accessorial breakdowns is going to be really important to know what options you have as well.
One
So
thing to add to that real quick, Kev.
yeah, go for it.
I saw a stat on oversize accessorial fees from FedEx and from UPS. In the last 4 years has gone up 250%, which is crazy. So that's since COVID and some of those changes, Overmax in the last 5 or 6 years has gone up 1,500%. It's crazy the amount that it's increasing. It's happening at kind of a slower pace because, I mean, not slower every year that they do it. It is this impact, but when you look back and not on a per year basis, but look at it over the last 3 to 5 years, the increase percentage is massive on an accessorial fee basis.
Absolutely.
I'm going to go ahead and hide this, and we can get into going into actually some of those KPIs. But before we dive into the software, if we have listeners here that are not a part of the Sifted software yet, and you're interested in getting your data in our system for us to analyze and for that software to go through and does what it does best, it's really simple to get your data linked to our system. This would be a secure link that we would send you. You would log in using your UPS or FedEx online account. It links that information and allows for us to automatically pull down for UPS shippers a full year's worth of data, for FedEx the last 6 months worth of data. I just wanted to showcase that real quick so that if anybody is wondering, hey, how do I get my data in your system? It's as simple as that.
Yeah. And then when you're actually in the software, you'll get a lot of dashboards like this one that we're showing here, which is called the spend trend summary, that has a lot of these general KPIs that we would be looking at. Average cost per pack is one of those that people like to monitor quite a bit. And if you look at the graph down at the bottom right, you can see that year over year, that average cost per pack is increasing significantly. So we would want to start working on a strategy to reduce that as much as possible. Another one that I generally like to look at is the accessorial percentage of spend, which is on the right there. Right now, this particular demo account has a 36.5%. We generally like to see that closer to 25 down to 20% is what we would consider to be healthy. But some industries are different. You might have just heavier packages in general that might cause that to go up. But from an overall perspective, we like to see that closer to around the 25. But one of the things I really like is this service overview that Caleb was kind of clicking through, because this is where we can start to dissect and create swim lanes for our particular strategies. Looking at ground commercial, some of these home delivery, even our express shipments, the more we can understand about our data, the more we can identify some of these swim lanes. If just to give you guys some examples, if we're looking for under a pound, then we would have different options like UPS, FedEx, DHL Ecom, UPS Mail Innovations, the Postal Service, Pitney Bowes, and some other regionals as well. But if we're going over a pound, then you can get pretty creative, because then if it's 1 to 5 pounds, you can have options again like on track or something like that. But as you get bigger and bigger, you can create these different swim lanes and then identify what the impact might be to you by making these swim lanes. Another place I really like to go to in our software is the time in transit. This is a really cool tool that we launched this year where you can actually compare your transit rates to what the industry is showing. And the industry is specific to your code that we get from, it's called the NAICS code. It's a really hard acronym to say, but what it's really important about here. So if you can see this, your FedEx is at 4.5 days, but on average, most other customers are getting 3.7. So there is a gap there that maybe you're not using or utilizing FedEx's network the way that they would want it to create that efficiency. It doesn't mean that they're doing a bad job. It just means that you may not be the perfect candidate for their service. Whereas with UPS, you're much lower than their average, the industry average. So you might be closer to a UPS, distribution center or something like that. And knowing where you are located could actually help you reduce these transit days just by switching a carrier or something like that. But you can look at on-time percentages here if that's important to your business. And that's why when Caleb said, creating a blanket template for a diversification strategy is really difficult for everybody. It's so specific to your business as a shipper. That's why it's important to know what your key metrics are, honestly, so that you can know where you can carve out some volume and identify other swim lanes to give to other carriers for the diversification.
That's perfect. I think, oftentimes we get asked questions, hey, Sifted, you have so much data on what's happening in the parcel industry. I know what my on-time delivery percentage is. I just don't know what it is compared to other shippers that are in the same industry as me. That's what this answers, and it helps you to determine, is my carrier performing okay, not just for me, but for me in comparison to my peers?
Yes.
And then if there's a red flag, you can identify it and say, look, now I have reason to take this subset of shipping or number of shipments or spend, and instead of it giving to this poor performing carrier, I can then be able to diversify it to another carrier that's going to do a better job for me.
Yep.
If we stop here and just pause for some questions, I would love to answer any questions that you all might have right now. Looks like we've got one in the Q&A on, hey, can we upload DHL data in the same manner? And I'm assuming based off of the credentials here, it's not as easy for the DHL side as just click and go, but our system can bring in DHL data, no problem. It's just a matter of contacting us, and we'll help you with that setup process. Another question comes here, says, how does the application derive industry numbers?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And that's the NAICS code that we get. You can get it from a lot of different locations. When you create your UIN or the tax number that you would use for your business, the government actually assigns you a code depending on what you identify as your business. And that information is shared sometimes in Zoom info, or you can get it in a few different places. It's a pretty long code. It's almost like a zip code where, it's 5 or 6 digits long, but we generally, it's so specific that we generally will roll it up into the top 2 or 3 digits to make sure that the population of your competitors and your peers actually makes sense.
Yeah.
So when you see like manufacturing, that could be pretty broad, but and retail can be a little bit more broad, but we wanted to make it so that you get a lot of different benchmarking data for the transit side to be able to compare to your own business to see, okay, what are other healthcare and social assistance companies doing compared to mine? And how are their transit comparing to mine or benchmarking against mine with the same carriers that I'm using? So that's how we get it. We get it from the government essentially, and that happens when you sign up and create the organization itself.
That's a great question. Love seeing that. Next question comes in, says, does the platform work for regional carriers as well? Yes, it does. And let us know what regional carriers you would like to work with, and we can validate to make sure that we can bring in that data. Okay. I'll keep my eye on this Q&A. Please keep asking them. I love keeping this as interactive as possible. And I think that there are just a number of carrier options that you have to choose from, but kind of following this path of what matters, what metrics do I need to be looking at? I thought it would be interesting to go through a bad example and a good example of what carrier diversification should look like for your business. Here is a bad example of carrier diversification. You've got about $3.1 million shipper here. Check out the average zone. This is from a distribution mapping standpoint. And the map on the left is color-coded. Each one of those dots is color-coded by zone. So the darker the zone, the further away it is to ship to, the more expensive it is to deliver to as well. So you can see zone 8 is all on that East Coast. This is a West Coast particular shipper. And it's single sourced with one carrier. This is not a great distribution network. That really would impact, hey, look, the data is screaming for me to add a regional carrier that I can either line haul some of my freight to, or that I can store some of my product out of a East Coast location and provide it not to a FedEx, but to provide it to a regional carrier like a On-Track, previously known as LaserShip. That would be a significant improvement on your average zone. Average zone on zone 7 is for a ground transit time is around 5 to 6 business days. Getting a regional carrier to handle in a regional area of zones 8 right here can substantially reduce that overall zone and get it to a 1 to 2 day transit time. Not to mention your average cost per pack, you're paying the most because it's traveling the furthest distance. A good carrier diversification distribution model that we see here, located on this side, check out the average zone in comparison. Average zone is 4, which means that the average transit times on a ground shipment anywhere between 3 to 4 business days. Pretty solid in that area. Still some room for improvement, but check out how many carriers we have listed down below. You've got UPS, LaserShip, which is now considered On-Track. I can click on each individual carrier and see, look at that perfect kind of distribution network and utilization of a regional carrier. Like, I love this. Seeing this in the data makes me so happy, because this is proper use of identification in the data to then putting it into a practical use and then monitoring it as the new data feeds come through and being able to say, my average zone in this area is a 3.2. I'm killing it. My customers are getting their shipments within a 1 to 2 business day transit time, and it's like an Amazon-like experience without paying premium services for it. This is what I love about kind of the power of the data here. We have another question that just popped in, says, what does it do for regional carriers? Is there a certain spend that is required? There isn't a particular spend, and I don't know if you mean that from getting data into our system, or if you mean that in terms of at what point, if I'm spending enough with FedEx and UPS, does it make sense for me to bring on a regional carrier? I think it's all very specific to you as a shipper. So if you are interested in bringing on a regional carrier and you want to be able to identify if this makes sense, contact us after. Oh, in the Sifted platform. No problem. Yeah, no, there's not a requirement, a spend requirement to be able to do it. And being able to see regional carrier data overlaid just like this, what we're showing you here, depends on the regional carrier that you're using. There are a lot of them. We have to make sure that we can bring in that data. So reach out to us after. But you would see it overlaid no different than what you're seeing here, where you can see your UPS, your FedEx, and any regional carrier data that you have. Or if you're interested in establishing a regional carrier, contact us and we'll help you walk through that with your CSM team. Make sure that that's right for business. Here's another question that says, you can use a regional carrier outside of your region, i.e. if I'm on the West Coast, I can use an East Coast regional carrier. So yeah, that's a really good question. We get asked that all the time. Hey, look, let's go back to this example here. I'm in the West Coast. I've got a substantial amount of business on the East Coast. How can I use a regional carrier? There are two main ways in which you can use a regional carrier in this way. If you have enough volume going to that part of the United States, like you see in this example, really heavy on zone 8, which is all East Coast, line haul, which means you consolidate enough shipments, you line haul it over to the East Coast, and then inject it into the regional carrier network at that point. It's a beautiful way to be able to do it. I often get questions asked on, doesn't that increase the transit time? It does on the line haul, but you make it up on the final delivery. Instead of it sitting in FedEx or UPS's network for 5 to 10 business days and bouncing around multiple areas of the country before it gets to the East Coast, you're just doing a straight shot line haul and then injection in. The second way you can do it is if you want to store some of your product at a third-party warehouse that is located in that area of the country that you want to use a regional carrier in. Very simple that you can be able to say all shipments that go to these states, we're just going to keep some of that product in that third-party location. That third-party shipper's job is to do pick, pack, and ship services on your account with that regional carrier. That's the cleanest way to do it. And you get a benefit of order comes through, shipment gets out for delivery, and it's usually next day or 2 day. It's beautiful. That's
Yeah,
great.
and we have seen that even though there are additional expenses using the third party, it actually can save you money per package and get there faster. So there are more than enough benefits if you have enough volume to make that viable. But again, really depends on your business, but there are definitely options, and we have seen it save our customers a lot of money that way too.
One thing I wanted to show, and this kind of goes back to this question here on how the carrier, FedEx and UPS, the national carriers work when they have massive hubs that they have a product coming in and out of. This is an example with FedEx on a overnight shipment from Southern California going to Salt Lake City, Utah. You can see FedEx is listed in the orange, and a regional carrier, in this case On Track, is listed in that dark blue. On an overnight shipment, oftentimes, not every time, but oftentimes FedEx will pick up. It will fly all the way to Memphis, Tennessee, to their sort facility there. That's their major national hub. It'll get sorted through. It will fly all the way back, pretty much the entire distance, go to Salt Lake City, and out for delivery at that point. When it's traveling this far of a distance, there are two main things that happen. You have more cause for potential error. And shippers who are concerned about their carbon footprint or being a more sustainable company, this is probably the least sustainable model that you can use. Regional carrier, here's an option. You've got On Track pickup in San Bernardino. It's going to go to their Reno location sort facility and then directly over to Salt Lake City. Look at the cost difference between the two. Overnight, $38.11 for FedEx. You're paying ground service for On Track at $12.89, but the way that they move it gets there next day anyways. Total transit day or transit time moved, total number of miles, 3,200 miles compared to 644 miles. It is a substantially cleaner way to be able to ship it, more sustainable. And if you are prone to damage on your product, This is consider using a regional carrier. It's going to substantially reduce the overall damage that you're going to experience because it's not bouncing around and being touched multiple times throughout the move.
And,
Uh,
yeah, if I want to actually jump back into the software here, because another concern we get from our customers as we're strategizing some diversification plans for them is, well, what if I drop a tier? What happens if I'm going to drop this tier? I'm going to lose my discounts. And that is something that you absolutely have to be aware of, because when you negotiate your contract, you negotiate these tier bands where, for FedEx, they look at the 52-week average. UPS, they also look at a 52-week average, but they do it on a week. They show you a weekly amount, whereas FedEx shows you the whole 52 week average spend for the entire 52 weeks. So it can get a little bit confusing, but we actually have this contract monitoring tool to show you where you are in your band. So for example, this customer is a demo account, but if I'm looking at FedEx, I can see that I am pretty high in my level 4 band, where I could peel off about $500,000 or less from them without affecting my discounts. Or with UPS, I'm already pretty low on my tier band. I might want to restructure that, but maybe I could even move this volume away and do something different with it. So knowing where you are in your bands is going to be really important to know how much volume I can actually peel away from that band. And then one thing that people ask is, okay, I can peel away some volume from my bands, but what happens if I peel enough away that I do actually drop a tier? So we actually had a tool come out in 2023 that many of you may have used. Some of you may not have even known that this exists. It's designed to help people with their negotiation to play around with different scenarios. It's called contract modeling, and you can actually, put in your proposals and different things like that if you're in the RFP process, but you can actually use this too to run through different scenarios that have nothing to do with the negotiation strategy. So what I've done here is, if you go down, Caleb, and just scroll down, it will have a lot of these different things. If you haven't seen this before, please reach out to your CSM and they can walk you through it if it's of interest to you. But I just want to highlight that this model can actually show you what the impact might be if you drop a tier band. So you can go look at your contract, say, my ground discounts, if I drop a tier, they're going to drop about a point in my discount. So instead of getting a 64.9% discount, I'm going to drop down to 63. Well, now you can use this particular tool to identify what the impact might be. So if I scroll all the way down, I've already input this in. For ground commercial, I can see that it's going to cost me about $21,000. That's a great baseline metric for me to then say, okay, as I peel away this volume in this swim lane, I need the regional carrier or this other strategy to make up more than $21,000 in savings in order for it to be viable for me. So this is a great opportunity for you to use software and actual data to quantify the impact of your particular strategy by peeling away volumes from your tier bands.
Yeah, and I would just add that the 52-week rolling average and the entire kind of overcomplication that FedEx and UPS tend to use on that is out of a designed purpose to keep you spending the most amount that you possibly can spend,
Yep.
with a fear of losing a discount or losing falling off of tier. I've seen multiple situations where shippers have fallen off of one or two tiers, but they're still net positive with utilizing the cost advantages of a regional carrier. Plus, they're no longer under the thumb of FedEx and UPS so heavily. So do not be afraid of falling off of tier. This is more of a feeling of just make sure you understand the tier structure and the impact of adding a regional carrier. So I've got another question that just popped in. Says, how would I go about to learn more about the Sifted product, to learn more information, to see if it's a good fit? We're currently using an audit company that also does our LTL and parcel metrics, but not as in depth. We hear that commonly, like this analytics are awesome. Like this is more in depth than what we currently have. In the chat window for you and everybody else, I've included a link that says book a personalized demo. When you click on that link, you can schedule a time. You can even upload your own data at that point. We can run an analysis and you can see it more in depth with your information to make sure that is Sifted a right fit for you. That's a great way to be able to do it. Does your tool work with LTL carriers like T-Force as well? Kevin, you want to give kind of the status of LTL?
Yeah, so we do ingest some LTL data, but it's more, we're very parcel focused. And so we do have some visibility into LTL spend, but a lot of these modeling tools, they don't work with LTL carriers. We've focused it primarily on the parcel side. Right now, it's UPS and FedEx are fully supported by all the modeling tools. And then in 2024, we're looking to introduce the modeling tools to several other carriers like USPS, On Track, Amazon, and Pitney Bowes. So the LTL tools only are from a visibility standpoint. They're not necessarily from a modeling standpoint. It's a very different model in general because they look at lines instead of having the contract just with one carrier.
Yeah.
It's a different model.
But Timothy, to answer your question from a high level, we can, bring that LTL data in and see it from like a spend trend summary and some of this information that you can see from here. Very similar, but on the LTL side. The question we got in that says these regional carriers are in Sifted, or do we need to do the UPS FedEx math in Sifted and then calculate savings of regional carriers manually?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, the tool, especially contract modeling, only works with UPS and FedEx currently. However, working with, if you're under the LI Pro subscription, then you'll actually have support from our logistics engineers to help you calculate the savings on the regional carrier math that way too. So there are ways that we can help you identify how I can calculate some of the regional carrier math manually, but we will use any tool we possibly can at our disposal to help you with that. But currently, do it yourself model, UPS and FedEx are the only two carriers that work with the models per se, but you will be able to get the visibility with regional carriers in the tool, get a lot of those metrics. You can actually export a lot of the details behind it too to help you do the math a little bit easier as well.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're just leaving you on your own for the regional carriers. There are a lot of different ways we can help, but the tools themselves in a DIY fashion won't work with the regional carriers at this moment.
These are all great questions. Please keep them coming. I think that there's some really good information that, if you've got a question, chances are other shippers listening in have the same question. I'll keep my eye on that. I think one thing to call out here that I want to bring back up is this is, again, great information here. If you go to the chat window, click on that book a personalized demo if you are not a Sifted client and you want to explore what that option looks like. Again, it's phenomenal to be able to see your data in this system and find some of those golden nuggets that you might not have known that is hidden in that data. But if you are a Sifted client and you're interested in diversifying, please contact your CSM or CXO. Our job is to be able to make sure that you stay up to date with most recent information on the regional side. And to Kevin's point, it's constantly changing. So let's work together on a regional carrier plan if that's something that you're interested in. Another question came in that says, how does the network optimization play into the diversification process? For me, that's a huge one. I'm looking at reducing my top zones and therefore reducing my average time in transit by reducing my top zones and therefore also reducing my cost. The more, the higher zones you ship to, the more expensive it is. So going back to this model here, I think is really critical to help determine where am I currently shipping today? I'll bring this one up. Where am I currently shipping today? And how can I be able to optimize from a distribution standpoint, whether it's adding a network optimization process here, where I'm either going to line haul it or I'm going to add a location in the East Coast that I store some of my product out of and ship my product out of, using a regional carrier, therefore having a diversified process. Either way, the net result is going to be lower zone, which means less time in transit, also less time being manhandled. Those shipments are going to be touched less, which also means less damage. And typically lower zone means a better rate. With that as well, your client gets the product faster for less money. Like, what else could you ask for?
Yep.
It's pretty awesome.
And we do have a network optimization tool that will actually help you identify where in the United States you should be looking at introducing a new location. You can use it. It only uses UPS and FedEx data, but it will allow you to actually identify the city or the area that you need to look at some of these maybe third-party warehousing solutions, which would then allow you to identify, okay, I can move these volumes into that third party and use these regional carriers or these different options in swim lanes. It's a really cool tool to help you identify the savings and save you some time from having to do all the math yourself to figure out which location I should actually be putting a warehouse in, or looking for a partner for a warehousing solution. But it's a great piece of the diversification process because it helps you identify those swim lanes and then also look for those partners that you could use as well to help you achieve those savings.
So we've got another question that came through. It says, in the distribution summary, can you filter by specific FedEx account if you have multiple? Absolutely. That's the beautiful part about this. You go over to your filters on the right-hand side, you click on carriers, you can hit a subset of carriers, or you can click down and look at each individual carrier account number to click on that particular account number in that carrier group. And I'll send out, and I got another one that says, hey, I don't see it in the Q&A. It's not in the Q&A for the demo option. It is in your chat window. So if you see chat in the chat window up top or on the Zoom toolbar, click on that. You'll be able to see that the two links that are there. The second link that's in there is really to subscribe to our Sifted newsletter. I think it's a phenomenal area to keep up to date with industry news and trends that we're seeing on a monthly basis. We'll also send an email out for anybody that has registered for this. And they can go on to sifted.com also to get a demo. We're a couple of minutes after our time. We've had a great participation on this call.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Kevin and I are going to hang out for the next couple of minutes. If anybody has any questions, ask away. We're going to be here. If not, thank you all so much for being here and really looking forward to it. Oh, we got another question that came in and says, what is Sifted's professional stance towards Amazon as a carrier? Necessary evil, future monopoly, or welcome third party for UPS and FedEx duopoly? Ooh, that's the
I
best
love this
question.
question.
Yeah.
This is a great question.
So my personal opinion is it is a welcome opportunity to knock FedEx and UPS off this duopoly. And depending on who you talk to, some feel like it's going to happen sooner than later. I'm in the camp that it's going to happen sooner, given the fact that Amazon built a substantial amount of capacity to handle COVID increases through online orders in their network, whether it's in their warehouse, their trucks, their airplanes. They built massive capacity to handle that. We are not shipping the same number of items. We're not ordering the same number of items from Amazon, although we're still doing a ton. I mean, look at my front porch for this Christmas, but it is that capacity is starting to grow, and Amazon is under the feeling of we need to fill our trucks and airplanes. Where else can we get some of that freight to move into our trucks and airplanes to make sure that that capacity doesn't become too much of an issue? They're going to turn to FedEx and to UPS there to get some of that business and obtain some of that market share. Kevin, what do you think?
Oh yeah, I agree with your sentiment. I think it is coming sooner rather than later, and I do welcome it as a competitor to UPS and FedEx because Amazon, we've already seen some pricing from Amazon for specific clients. Are we encouraging clients to go in that direction? If it makes sense, yes, because Amazon is being selective about where you're located to see if this service right now is a fit. I do believe that they will open that up. This is one of the first times that they'll come pick up your shipments, which is really awesome, actually. And the pricing that we've seen is super aggressive.
Yeah.
Like crazy aggressive. And so they're not just going after UPS and FedEx, they are like undercutting as much as they possibly can to get that volume. So we do think it will be very competitive for people. I don't think that pricing will be like a long-term strategy for Amazon, but they're definitely trying to get volumes to fill up those trucks and airplanes. So I do think it's coming soon, and I really do think it's going to scare UPS and FedEx, which means that the shippers market will be here to stay. You guys will have more leverage against UPS and FedEx to get those discounts, to not have such big changes year over year in pricing. Amazon will be a very welcome third party because they kind of have the approach of, we're Amazon and we don't care what you're doing. We're going to do our thing and we're going to do it better than you. And people are going to benefit. And so it will be a really fun and exciting time as a shipper, maybe not as a UPS or a FedEx rep, but as a shipper, it should be a really good opportunity.
Yeah. Love that question. Yeah. Just to add to that, if there's any others that come through, I'll be looking here, but to add to that, Amazon, it's not like their only business is to ship product from A to B. They have other facets of their business that are extremely profitable, like their Amazon Web Services, their AWS. There is a substantial amount of other businesses that Amazon has that they can be able to take, in some cases, a bath on breaking into the FedEx and UPS market because they're making it up elsewhere. And they have an ability to have deep pockets to do that. I mean, look at how long that took to be profitable. So very interesting. And I think, to Kevin's point, interesting times. Okay, if there's not anything else, we really appreciate everybody's attendance here. Feel free to go to sifted.com, check out those links that I put into the chat window, message us. We're here to help. Thanks so much for joining, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.